Hello and welcome. So glad you could be with us tonight. I'm going to be talking tonight with Holly Jorgensen. Holly is one of the most eclectic persons I know, one of the most, I'm sure, in the Twin City area. She is a new author. We're going to talk about a wonderful book she's written. She's a great photographer. She's been a teacher, a librarian. She is a great singer, songwriter. She has built and reconstructed the home she lives in by herself with some friends helping. So she's a real jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades. The book Holly wrote is called Enchanted, and I need to look at my notes for the subtitle, Enchanted Reflections from a Joyfully Green and Frugally Rich Life. And we're going to talk about living simply, is kind of my simple way of describing it. Before we get started, I have to just show you my bionic arm. I was in an accident about 6 weeks ago and broke my elbow, dislocated it, and also broke my wrist. So I've been out of commission for a while. I'm back tonight in the studio, and I wanted to explain, in case you were wondering what kind of wild jewelry I was sporting tonight. Well, the book, Holly, we're going to focus on the book, not all of your other talents tonight. How did you decide to write a book? Because it's a huge job. I've interviewed a lot of authors, and we've talked about what a big, big task it is.
It really is. It really is. And first, thanks for having me, Mary. It's great to be here.
Yes, you're welcome.
I have to be honest. I've been working on the thing for 10 years, on and off, through life events. But I kind of started it the same way I started my speaking. People asked me to speak about my life. And I didn't really realize how different my life was, my lifestyle, than most people's. But they asked me to speak, and then as I did that, people started asking for a book because I had way too many stories to tell in an hour or even 2 hours. So that was my initial motivation. But as I got into it, I started really realizing how much I was learning from writing the book. And therefore I knew that other people would also learn and hopefully be inspired.
So you were getting insights about your life that you hadn't had before?
Exactly.
Oh, how
well, when you write
interesting.
about your life, you really have to think about it hard.
Yes. When you're sharing it with strangers and family and friends. Yeah.
And then the book, though it's not just memoir, it's really about ecology and a lot of other issues. So I had to do research. I read a number of other books to tie those ideas solidly into my book.
Yes, as I read it, I noticed a lot of references to research and studies, and that really kind of bolsters your opinions, doesn't it?
That's what I'm
thoughts.
hoping, yes.
I want to go back to why you developed a very simple, frugally green life, because that doesn't just come naturally to most of us. Were your folks very, very purposefully simple in their lifestyle?
I don't know about simple, but they were certainly frugal. We weren't poverty-stricken, but we never had a lot. And my parents were, they conserved resources. And I grew up on rummage sales, but not exclusively. But my mother also was a great seamstress. So we made most of my clothes. And they were, so yes, they were frugal, but I've taken it quite a few steps beyond that as an adult.
You were telling me before the camera started rolling about your outfit tonight. Do you mind sharing it with
Not at all.
audience?
When we were younger, Mom would say, don't tell people you got that at a rummage sale. And now it's a cool thing. Everybody wants to share how cheaply they are able to live. So, and you wanted some examples of how I save money. So I thought, well, I'll wear an example.
Yeah.
I have new underwear on, and that's about the only thing that I ever buy new when it comes to clothing. but my shoes from the church rummage sale, the skirts from the thrift store, and this jacket I found at the Curbside Boutique.
And
You know what that
curbside,
is?
she means curbside, don't you?
Yes, there are many communities who have periods in the summer, weekends, where they let people put things out on the curb to be picked up by the trash. And it's supposed to really be trash, but there's so much out there that's not trash. A lot of furniture and a lot of clothing. And I often find things that are just like brand new and sometimes even have the tag on them.
And nice quality,
Nice
as
quality.
this is, I'm guessing.
And if I know that if I don't pick it up, it's going in the landfill the next morning. So that experience has not only saved me money and been fun, but it's really deeply influenced my philosophy and my view of the world, knowing how much America throws away.
And when we do read about landfills and realize how long they're going to take before they are gone, it's depressing,
Yes.
isn't it?
Especially plastics. It's very, very depressing. And what the plastics are doing to the oceans.
Right, into our fish and aquatic life.
Yes.
Tell us some more examples, because not only your clothing, but everything about your life, really. But give us some more examples, Holly, so
Sure.
people get a real feel.
Well, I started shopping at the Curbside Boutique when I moved into my house, and I wanted to do some reconstruction, as you said. And I didn't really rebuild the house, but I guess I did do quite a bit, more
Yes,
than
you
most people
did.
would do. But out back, there was a pigeon coop that the previous owner was going to tear down or burn down. And I said, no, why don't you leave it there? And I decided to fix it up. So it's a long story, but basically I thought on the curb maybe I could find some building materials, which I absolutely could. And I ended up expanding this little pigeon coop and turning it into a really lovely little guest cabin, all with trash. Scrap material, insulation, drywall, knotty pine, paint from the recycling center, furniture that was out on the curb. And it just became a wonderfully exciting project. And I ended up, after a few years of work on and off, with a lovely little guest cabin. And my basement was the next really huge transformation because it was just really trash. It had potential. When I bought the house, I knew I could do something with it because it was fieldstone. But it had been crumbling. It was built in 1925, so it was really not in good shape. But I did the same thing. I scrounged around, just kept my eyes open, checked in dumpsters, and I found these wonderful cedar logs, tongue and groove cedar logs, and all the materials really that I need to transform it from just a kind of empty, trashy basement to really a lovely room. I call it my up north downstairs, because
It has a real cabin feel, doesn't it?
It really does. Wood stove, etc.
The fact that you did this and tackled it as a single woman by yourself is something that's so admirable. And you weren't a person who went to a school to learn how to do this kind of work with drywall and work with building, were you? I mean,
Not
you
at
learned
all.
on the job, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I didn't grow up with that.
What gave you the courage, Holly, to tackle that? I mean,
You know,
it's
Mary,
quite-
I've often said a lot of the projects that I've done, if I'd known how hard it was, I wouldn't have done them. But I kind of went into them naively, thinking, well, I can do that, you know. And also being a librarian for many years.
I bet that helped.
You know, I was exposed to all these books, and I realized, so when I had windows and doors that I was going to install in my cabin, I just looked up in books, you know, how to install a door. And then I'd ask the guys at the home store and ask my friends, and then I'd just figure it out. But I have to add that I couldn't have done all of that if I'd been a perfectionist.
And you talk about that in the book. There's a Japanese phrase, wabi
Wabi-sabi.
sabi. Tell us why that's important to you, and it's a very big concept.
It is, and it's something I just stumbled across in the library. There was this book on wabi-sabi, and basically it's a Japanese concept or philosophy of not only accepting but appreciating imperfection. And they have wonderful examples, like instead of the full moon, if there's a drift of clouds over the moon, it becomes more beautiful. Or that one single pansy with the light coming through it can be more beautiful than a dozen roses. And that a gold piece of jewelry is more beautiful once it has a patina on it. And all of these concepts and natural materials without paint, it just rang true to me. And I realized that not only were they more beautiful, they were also usually much better for the earth. You know, it's not about plastic, it's about wood that may be worn, but it's still usable and still beautiful.
Do you think that translates in your mind and experience into growing older too?
Absolutely.
With the patina, right?
Respect for age is a big part of wabi-sabi. And I've always embraced that. And of course, the older I get, the more I embrace that. And it helps to realize how many things, including people, do improve with age.
I think that it's a generalization, but I think it's true that most of us do get more mellow or more kind or more generous or more fun-loving or whatever.
And more accepting of imperfection. We know in our society there's a lot of harm that comes from insisting on perfection. And of course the media and advertising push that. They want you to buy something new because the old one is scratched or dirty or...
That's very much a part of the consumption society we're in.
Yes.
And that's another one of your themes, isn't it, too? Let's not be avid consumers.
Exactly. What I've done, it's fun for me, and I'm saving money, but it also has really made me aware of how much we consume and then throw it away. Which, loving the earth as I do, that's a really hard thing to watch. And it's if you scrounge like I do and you look in dumpsters and you just have your eye open to the curb, you see how much people throw away. And it's not good for the economy either. It's not a good way to live, in my opinion.
Some people will say, yes, this sounds admirable, but I don't have time to go looking for the perfect drywall that will fit in my basement, or a jacket that looks great with my skirts, or whatever. How do you respond to that question?
Well, I wouldn't criticize anyone. I know that people have busy lives, we all do, and what I do takes time, but I also really enjoy it. And I don't spend a lot of time on a lot of the things that other people do. You know, people say, oh, if you go to a church rummage sale, you know, you have to walk through the whole place. But I only do that a few times a year. I don't run to the store often like most people do. And it's not like I'm out there every weekend looking in the trash. It's not a huge amount of time. It's really not. As far as the construction, yeah, that's something that takes time, but it's a joy for me. It really is.
And you don't watch TV, or not much, right?
I don't watch much. I don't have cable. I watch a lot of Channel 2.
Okay, good.
This Old House. I mean, things like that where I'll learn something. And things that I consider quality that are enriching me. But it's something that I've become more mindful about. I'm very highly influenced by Thoreau, and one of his lines was, as if you could kill time without injuring eternity. And I think that's so true. We kill time so much, and a lot of TV watching is just killing time. And what I try to do is just be mindful. If I turn on the TV to see what's on, and I start getting involved in a show, I ask myself, is this enriching me? Am I feeling good about it? Am I learning something? Am I really enjoying it? Or is the tension in the show, which is very common in most shows today, is it just making me more tense? How am I going to feel when I've watched this? Am I going to feel like I wasted an hour or was enriched by it? So I do watch TV, but not very much, and I do it mindfully.
You know, another quote that I love from Thoreau, and it maybe needs to be worked out a little to apply here, but he said, "Details fritter away one's life." And certainly in our busy, hectic world right now, we probably, if we're not living the simple life as you are adding lots of details that are somewhat optional, if we use the word details loosely. And fritter away one's life, it's kind of a startling statement, isn't it?
It is. And we do it.
And we do it. Yeah. We do it. When you found the place that you now live in, you fell in love with it just by looking at it, right?
I did.
You didn't know the people living there. And one of the themes that comes out in your book that I find intriguing is kind of putting in front of your own focus something you want and then being aware of that and going for it.
Yes.
Just briefly tell us the story of how you got your house that you're in.
Sure. Some people say I manifested it, and I would not say that, but I will say I thought for a long time about what I really wanted. And mindfulness about your wants and your needs is one of my keys. And I had decided that if there was one thing I would really, really make me happy would be living on a lake. So I thought about that, didn't care about much else. So my mom and I were looking around and we found this little lake and there was a little tiny house on it. And so I had my eye on that. But long story short, I got to know the neighborhood. They were friendly and invited me over. And so when one of them called me and said, "Holly, Bob's thinking about selling, get out of here." And I said, "Who's Bob? You know, he has the best property on the lake, you know." So he introduced me to Bob, and it was another couple years before I got that house. So, you know, one of my themes is from Siddhartha: I can think, I can wait, I can fast. I thought deeply about what was important to me. I waited. I mean, it was years before I got that house.
So did you have a feeling that this was your house, your property?
Absolutely.
You did. That's interesting.
Yeah, so there's more details in my book about how I actually found these blue and brown dishes and silverware and stuff in a dumpster that matched the house and the carpeting, you know, because I already had this image. And but I got to know the little old man who lived there. And when it was finally time for him to sell, I think I got the house because he knew how much I loved it. I already loved it. He knew I would take care of the property and the trees and leave it natural instead of, you know, tearing it down and rebuilding. So it was about relationships and it was about patience. And I think that's how I've gotten a lot of the things in my life, by waiting and thinking about what's really important to me.
And one of the things that the little lake home gives you is a real connection to nature and to animals. And that's another theme in your book. And it's a really big theme.
It is.
She's had some amazing experiences with animals, including a fish who became your friend and all kinds of unique things. Did that love of animals spring, Holly, from childhood? Were you always an animal lover? And can you just tell us one quick story about one of your favorite animal friends?
Sure. I've always loved animals, yes, and never had a lot, but one of the themes in my book also is that you don't have to own something to love it. And I've always loved other people's animals. And when I moved onto that lake, the neighbor had a dog that eventually became my dog when he died. But we had this wonderful relationship. And then there was a neighbor's horse that was a half-wild Mustang who bonded with me. And I loved that horse, and I knew that he loved me. But the most unusual story is the fish. And people are just taken with this because it's so weird. Who would think that a sunfish, wild in the lake, would connect with you? But this did. 3 years ago, it was a green sunfish, and they always, the male guards the nest next to the dock, so that's not unusual. But this one kept looking up at me, and I'd come down, and I just could swear this fish is looking at me, and I'd put my hand in the water, and after a while, he started letting me pet him. And fish don't do that,
Right.
And so I had to look up what he was, because I know nothing about fish, and he's a green sunfish. So I named him Greenie so that I'd remember what he was. And the next summer, he showed up again. And I knew, he acted the same, and when I go swimming, he'd rub on my leg. So this last summer was the 3rd summer, and he came and he brought a little friend with him, whom I call Spot. And Spot is the same way. And there's been lots of adventures, but the one that really convinced me that this fish really knew me and wasn't just, a matter of territory by the dock. I swim across the lake virtually every day in the summer. And one day I swam across and I saw a beautiful sunset. So I decided to sit on a log at the other end of the lake. And I was sitting there and I looked down and there's Spot looking up at me. And I went, Spot? And he has a scar on his fin, so I know when it's Spot. And I put my hand in, and sure, he came and nuzzled my hand. That fish followed me across the lake. I can't explain it, but I tell people that to encourage them to open your eyes and open your heart and realize that animals will love you from the strangest places where you don't expect it.
And that's that interconnection that we're learning more about as time goes on here now in the emotional life of animals and how we're not all that different.
Absolutely.
And you're able to, somehow with your more quiet life, Holly, I think you've had time and opportunity to open up to the animal world and the world of nature more than those of us who are more go, go, go.
Absolutely. And I've planned my life that way. I've always been very busy. I've often had several jobs at the same time, but I've often worked part-time because I know how important those other things are to me. The time is much more important than money to me. And I need my time outside to keep me sane and healthy and happy.
I would love it if you would read that paragraph that I thought kind of sums up a lot of the important ideas, not all of them from the book, but we're almost out of time, Holly.
Sure.
So she'll share just a paragraph from the book toward the end of the book here, and
Sure.
it'll give you a good feel for it.
And I will say this is about as preachy as I get. I'm very much an environmentalist, but most of the book is stories about building, about the fish, about friendships, about what I consider the good life. But I can't help but encourage people to think. We can replace the pressure to compete with a desire to share. We can choose to value a house as a home, a place to live and grow in a community, rather than primarily an investment or a cash machine. We can decide that saying no thank you to advertising that insults our intelligence is not about depriving ourselves, it's freeing ourselves. We can say no to manufacturing that disrespects the earth, knowing it's not about slowing the economy, but encouraging alternatives and saving the planet. If enough of us ignore advertising we don't like, it will go away. If we buy only what we really want and need, the false and flimsy parts of the economic flock will be culled, while those of true value will thrive. In good or bad times, both economic and ecological, we have plenty of reasons to consciously say whoa to the cult of accumulation and yes to simplicity and sustainability. We have an opportunity to become more truly ourselves, rather than cogs in the wheels of consumption and waste. We can rest gratefully in the bosom of sufficiency.
I love that paragraph because it includes so many of the key ideas in the book, Holly. The book is not in print yet, but it will be very, very soon. So how are people going to be able to find it?
The best way will be to go to my website, which is easy to remember, hollyonTheLake.com. Much of my life centers on that lake, so just not in the lake or at the lake, just remember hollyonTheLake.com, and it'll be available through that and other places, but that'll be your key
And
place.
you also are blogging with a similar title, so they can do more reading if they're intrigued.
Sure.
Right.
I don't blog real often, but I do, and there are other pages about my past projects, etc.
Well, thank you so much for coming
Thank
down.
you, Mary.
And
It was great to
joining
be
me
here.
again and telling us about this great book. Again, the title, and we'll hold it up here too, Enchanted Reflections from a Joyfully Green and Frugally Rich Life. We're going to go out now with a song under the credits that Holly's written and sings on. How about one line from it?
Oh, sure. It relates to my book, even though I wrote it years ago. 'Cause when you learn to travel light, you're gonna find out who you are. So even back then, I was thinking the same theme, travel light.
Thank you for sharing your traveling light theme and life and story, Holly. It's been great.
Thank you, Mary. It's been great to be here.
Thank you for being with us. I'll see you next week. Until then, have a good week.
Learn to carry moonbeams in a jar. Learn to let your dreams take